Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
All right, so today we're tackling this word, eschewing. Like deliberately avoiding something.
Yeah, I've heard that word, but I admit, not sure I could have given you a definition off the top of my head.
No worries, that's what we're here for. Basically, it means to avoid something, but like habitually, often for like moral or practical reasons. And we're going to use it to jump into some bigger questions about setting boundaries, challenging beliefs we've always held, and even figuring out when avoiding something is actually good for you or, well, maybe holding you back.
That is a lot packed into one little word, huh?
Right? And all this is inspired by someone who's been, like, really reflecting on these exact questions. So we're diving into their thoughts today.
Very good.
Yeah, and they start off talking about social situations and that balance between, wanting to connect with people, be part of things, but also not overdoing it, honoring your own limits. Like, ever struggle with that?
Oh, all the time. I think most people can relate to feeling that pull, right? Wanting to belong, but also needing space.
Yeah, for sure. And our source talks about, like, used to feel obligated to say yes to everything, every invitation. But they eventually realized that wasn't sustainable. Start prioritizing their well-being, setting boundaries, and even, like, giving themselves permission to just dib out when they needed to.
That's such a good point. You don't have to be on all the time.
But it's tricky, though, right? Like, when does dipping out become self-care, and when is it actually avoidance? Maybe even holding you back from something good.
That's where self-awareness comes in, I think. Our source talks about learning to listen to their energy levels, like noticing those little signs that they need to step back, recharge. And I think that's key. It's not about isolating yourself, it's more about being mindful. Sometimes saying no to something so you can say yes to what really matters and be fully present for it.
Love that. And it kind of ties in with what they say about the power of boundaries,
Mm.
especially, with people who maybe don't have your best interests at heart. They talk about becoming more discerning about who gets access to their energy, their vulnerability. Like, not everyone earns that privilege.
Absolutely. We often feel like we have to give everyone the same level of, I don't know, access to ourselves. But that's just not realistic, is it? And this is where I think eschewing, like avoiding certain people or situations, actually becomes a form of self-protection, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like a superpower.
Totally.
So it's not just about avoiding stuff you dislike. It's more like being intentional about who and what you let into your life,
Mm.
which leads me to, like, what are those red flags, those cues that tell you to hold back, to eschew a situation or even a relationship?
Well, for our source, it was about learning to trust their gut, those little intuitive whispers that something's not quite right. It's not about being paranoid, but just being aware, picking up on those subtle signs that maybe, it's time to back away.
I get that. And sometimes those instincts might even lead you to question things you've always believed, even beliefs that come from your family. Our source talks about disagreeing with family on certain traditions, and those conversations, oh man, can be so tricky.
Oh, for sure. And, our source doesn't say you have to cut ties or anything drastic like that. It's more about approaching these conversations with respect, trying to understand where your family's coming from, even if you don't agree. It's about honoring your roots, but also, forging your own path.
That's such a good point. It shows that eschewing isn't always about creating distance. Sometimes it's about establishing healthy boundaries that allow for both connection and, respectful disagreement. Like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right, exactly. It's finding that balance.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear from you, listener. Have you ever had to unlearn something that you were taught? Maybe something that just didn't resonate with your values anymore.
It's all part of growing, right?
Yeah.
Questioning the narratives we've been given and finding our own truth.
And sometimes that growth involves looking back at times when we maybe chose to avoid things, those what ifs that kind of linger in the back of our minds. Our source talks about how, as a child, their world felt so much smaller, so their fears felt bigger. Challenges seemed insurmountable.
Oh, yeah, I remember feeling like that. As a kid, everything feels so much more intense, right? Because your understanding of the world is still developing. But then you grow up, you gain some perspective, and you look back and think, wow, I was so worried about that. It wasn't that big a deal.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder, thinking about all the things we might have avoided back then. Is there anything you, listener, would approach differently now, like knowing what you know now?
It's all about learning and growing from those experiences, right? And sometimes that means facing those fears head on. But, our source also acknowledges that avoidance isn't always a bad thing.
Oh, right, right. They talk about how it can actually be a really valuable tool when you use it strategically. Like, they share a story about needing to step away from a friendship that had become, like, really draining.
Yeah, and they realized it wasn't a failure, it was actually self-preservation, like giving themselves the space they needed to recharge, to focus on their own well-being.
So, it's not about saying avoidance is always the answer. But sometimes stepping back can be the smartest move. It's like that saying, choose your battles wisely.
Absolutely. You don't have to engage in every conflict or try to fix every problem. Sometimes the wisest choice is to step away, conserve your energy.
Yeah. And it's not always easy to know when to do that, right?
Yeah.
Knowing when to step back, when to engage.
Yeah.
It's a constant process of like checking in with yourself, figuring out what's best for you in that moment.
Totally agree. It's all about self-awareness and being honest about your motivations. Like, why are you choosing to avoid this? Is it because you genuinely need space, or is it something else?
Yeah. And that's what we're going to dig into even deeper in the next part of our deep dive. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break.
It's tough though, right? Like, knowing when to step back, it's kind of easier said than done.
Totally. And that reminds me, our source talks about this tricky line between like strategic avoidance and just plain procrastination. How do you know if you're actually being smart or just like kicking the can down the road?
Right. Like, are you really taking a break or just avoiding the thing you should be doing?
Exactly.
Our source had this great analogy about how sometimes we treat avoidance like it's a credit card. You keep racking up debt, those unaddressed issues, but eventually, gotta pay it back with interest.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Like, they admitted to sometimes using avoidance to cope with, like tough emotions or situations they didn't want to deal with.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there, putting off that hard conversation or that giant task that just feels overwhelming.
Totally human, right? Nobody likes being uncomfortable. But what our source emphasizes, being honest with yourself about why you're avoiding something. Is it to give yourself time to process, to prep? Or is it straight up fear running the show?
So it's like asking yourself, okay, what's the real reason I'm doing this? And is it actually helping me or just keeping me stuck?
Exactly. Is it self-preservation or is it a procrastination habit? That's the key difference.
And our source talks about struggling with this, especially with like big life decisions. They described feeling totally paralyzed, scared of making the wrong choice, and it just kept them stuck for ages.
Yeah, they realized that the fear of messing up was actually preventing them from moving forward at all. Like, sometimes doing something, even if it's the wrong thing, is better than doing nothing.
It's like that saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Right. Our source is all about taking calculated risks. Stepping outside that comfort zone and seeing failure as just feedback. It's a learning opportunity.
So it's finding that balance between being thoughtful, but also decisive, not just rushing into things, but not letting fear keep you frozen in place either.
Our source had this great tip, they said, to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Because often we make these scenarios in our heads that are way worse than reality.
Oh, I love that. It's like
Yeah.
challenging those scary stories we tell ourselves and getting some perspective.
And they even flipped the script on failure. They were like, make it your friend. It's inevitable, you will mess up. But that's how we learn. It's about embracing those imperfections. Sometimes those wrong turns lead to something even better, something you never expected.
That's so important, especially in a world that's obsessed with like being perfect and instantly successful.
Our source is all about like true growth takes time. You got to be patient and embrace the messiness of life. It's not always going to be pretty.
And sometimes the biggest lessons come from those moments where we totally trip up and have to figure out how to get back up again.
Right. They even had this idea of keeping a failure journal, like not to focus on the negative, but to actually see the lessons learned, celebrate how resilient you are.
I love that idea. It's about seeing those failures as stepping stones,
Right.
part of the journey. Like you're not defined by your mistakes, you're defined by how you handle them. It's like our source's whole journey with this eschewing thing.
Mhm.
It's gone way beyond just avoiding things. It's more about like really knowing yourself, knowing when to charge ahead and when to, pump the brakes.
Right. It's like eschewing, avoidance. It's not good or bad in itself. It's more like a tool, right?
Yeah.
You can use it strategically to grow, to take care of yourself, or you can misuse it and get stuck.
And as we wrap up our deep dive today, our source leaves us with this like really interesting question. What if sometimes avoiding something is the wisest choice?
Oh, yeah, that's deep. It kind of goes against everything we're taught, right? Like, you gotta face your fears head on, always. But what if sometimes stepping back is actually the braver thing to do?
Right, like it's not about giving in to fear, but more like recognizing a situation's just bad for you and choosing to protect yourself.
Totally. Our source talked about learning to tell the difference between stuff that's like uncomfortable but good for you, it'll help you grow, versus stuff that's just plain toxic. It's draining you and it's not worth it.
Yeah, that makes me think about those times when you feel pressure to stay in a relationship, a job, even though it's not working anymore.
Hmm.
But you're scared to leave because what if you regret it? What will people think?
It's tough to ignore those outside voices, but like our source says, we get to choose what we let into our lives. And sometimes choosing yourself means walking away.
Even when it's hard,
Yep,
it all comes back to trusting your gut,
right.
knowing when to say no.
And that's what this whole eschewing thing is about, I think. It's about making conscious choices. It's about being strategic and, in the end, creating a life that feels true to you.
It's powerful, right? Like realizing you do have control over your experiences. And sometimes the most powerful move is just to walk away.
And to really own that choice, that's freedom.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on eschewing, we want to leave you with this. Listener, what are you choosing to avoid and why?
Yeah.
Is it helping you or holding you back? What would it look like to be more intentional with how you spend your time, your energy? We've given you a lot to think about. Now go explore your own answers.